Yo, what is up? What is up? I'm excited because this is my first episode under the NBA Big Board podcast. I'm taking over for Chad. And in this episode, we're going to talk about what went down at the Nike Hoop Summit this weekend. And also, with the NBA season being over, the standings are set. And I'm going to talk about my mock draft 1.0 that is dropping on NBABigBoard.com. Check it out. Yo, what is up? What is up? You are listening to NBA Big Board, the NBA Big Board podcast. I almost said Locked On NBA Draft, but this is my first episode taking over for Chad Ford and the NBA Big Board podcast. But before I get started, first of all, thank you for each and every listener that has made Locked On NBA Draft or even NBA Big Board your first listen of the day. And I really appreciate it. And I appreciate this opportunity to take over Chad's feed on NBA Big Board. Chad has been very instrumental in my career. And I can't say we've known each other a long time. We met last year around the NBA draft and we did a live draft show together and we just kind of clicked from there. And from there, he's just really been, like I said, instrumental. I mean, for him to turn over his newsletter and his podcast to me, it means a lot. It really means a lot. And so for all the listeners, I just want to let you know that I appreciate you, staying during this transition. You know, it's one of those things where you could easily just say, well, this is not Chad, so I'm not going to listen. So I know I have big shoes to fill. And in order to fill those big shoes, I'm going to make the NBA Big Board podcast 5 days a week. So it's like I'm wearing 5 pair of socks to fit into Chad's shoes. So thank you so much for just welcoming me with open arms and all the messages that I've received. And I mean, I really appreciate it. So, but before we get into that, I want to tell you about BetOnline. It is our sponsor, and you know about BetOnline. But if you do not know about BetOnline, it has you covered for all of your needs this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. And that is because BetOnline is where the game starts. I have my guy, Michael Visenberg, who is the basketball information specialist for Pro Insight. And he was at the Nike Hoop Summit this weekend. All right, that was a long introduction. Mikey, how is everything going? You are in Portland, Oregon. I'm a Blazers fan. And some of those lineups are a little crazy lately. I'm a basketball junkie, but I feel like even the most hardcore NBA fan is on Google looking up some of the guys in the Blazers rotation. So how's everything in Portland outside of the Blazers being bad this year?
Rafael, first off, just wanted to thank you so much for having me on and wanted to congratulate you on taking over Chad Ford's NBA Draft Big Board. And I will say that the Portland Trail Blazers have been an absolute roller coaster this season. And I'm going to the season finale tomorrow. It's interesting to see some of these young players, but you just kind of wonder how many are going to stick around in the long run. But nonetheless, you get to see some young talent and, them trying to solidify a roster spot. As far as the rest of Portland, I thought this week at the Hoop Summit went absolutely fantastic. I thought both rosters were constructed really well, and there was a lot of talent. And it was great to have it back after 2 years where it was canceled due to COVID-19.
Yeah, one of these years I'm going to make it. It's been on my bucket list. And the reason I didn't make it this year is because I'm in Milan. I've been trying to spend this entire year scouting in Europe and it's been tough. My wife is pregnant, so she was with me at first, and then once we found out we were expecting, it made sense for her to go back to the States to go to her doctor's appointment. So I'm traveling back and forth between Dallas and wherever at in Europe. It's anywhere between a 6 and 7 hour time difference. So it's like 3 weeks here, 1 week back, and now it's just starting to catch up and take a toll on me. And so I wanted to go, but then I'm like, all right, that is anywhere between an 8 and 9 hour time difference from Portland to, depending on what city that I'm in Europe. And then I was already messing up my body clock by staying up till 5 o'clock in the morning watching the NCAA tournament and the Final Four. So I chose to miss it this year, and I wanted to go, man. I mean, there's a few guys that I've seen in the Dallas area that are playing in it, but that's why I have you on. So tell me, who stood out to you, and who could be maybe a future Blazer in 2 years?
Well, first off, I would say it mostly came from the USA roster, and I'd say the guy that stood out to me quite a bit was Dariq Whitehead, who,
Okay.
it was to be expected. I feel like Dariq Whitehead is possibly the number one player in the high school class. Obviously, you have Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson as the possible top two for the 2023 NBA draft. But
Shaden
I
Sharp,
just think,
if he decides to stay in school.
yeah, he would be up there as well. But
Yeah.
I think Dariq could seriously compete with him also. Just really good defender. Can do a little bit of everything. Like, and then during the game, he hit 5 3-pointers. He was 5 of 7 from the 3-point line. And some of them were like, some tough step backs, really good in transition, is a good passer as well, like has the necessary length, and has some athletic burst also. So he's somebody that I liked as soon as I saw him at USA basketball minicamp in Colorado Springs in 2018. And he's just like stood the test of time. And I think all of the time they spend in Montverde Academy is really paid off. And, they won the Geico Nationals this year. So yeah, I thought Dariq was solid during practices. They had a scrimmage and he was all right, but in the game, he was one of the better players. Yeah, absolutely.
So for the audience or the listeners that aren't familiar, describe his game. Like, where is he going to school, his position?
Yeah.
Just give them a little bit of insight on who he is.
So, for sure. Dariq is, I would say, like in the 6'5", 6'6" range. He's a guard who can probably play up and play the wing. I think defend a few different positions. And he is just, I wouldn't say he's like a primary initiator, but he can do some things on ball. A really good scorer. And yeah, I just think that he's going to be like one of the go-to guys for that Duke team next year. So, and they're bringing in a really solid recruiting class, and they had 2 other players on the USA team for the Nike Hoop Summit.
What's crazy is, if I'm not mistaken, he played high school with Cade Cunningham. Was it him that played with Cade and Scotty Barnes?
And Scotty and Moses and Dayron
and Sharp?
Yeah, he was on that team.
Yeah, and that arguably that is like, I forgot who I was talking to. Maybe it was Kofi Coburn, and I forgot where he went to school at. But we had like a debate over which was the best high school team ever. And I mean, just naming the names on that Montverde Academy, that has, I mean, what school stood a chance? Like, they could have went to the Final Four with their high school roster, if you really think about it.
It's certainly possible. Yeah. It's certainly possible. Like, look at the NBA success that they've already had, the guys from Montverde, and I think they're going to add to it from that team.
Yep. All right, who else stood out to you?
One guy who stood out quite a bit during practice, it had, I wouldn't say like a quiet game, but a guy I really liked and have liked since I saw him at a young age as well, is Jarris Walker. Committed to Texas. He's about 6'7", maybe pushing 6'8". But the thing with Jarris is he's just always had like this pro body from a really young age. And I think it's just gotten better over time. He played at IMG Academy. He had 2 fantastic games in Geico. I loved his defensive intensity. I think he's a really good cutter and slasher. I like the fact that he has, quite a bit of passing ability as well. He can do some things on ball. Just with his combination of size, athleticism and strength. I think it's going to be a really great fit in Houston. And I think he could be there a pretty short time, actually.
All right, I had a couple more questions, but I want to talk to you about Built Bar. All right, it is April, and I'm pretty sure most of you have given up on your New Year's resolutions. And if you have, even if you haven't, I would suggest you try the Built Bar Puffs. If you have, great. If you have not, you're missing out. It's one of the best tasting bars. It's this protein. It's actually the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, not just a protein bar. It's a treat, and it's covered with 100% real chocolate. You heard me, 100% real chocolate, and it is a fan favorite. It has some incredible flavors, yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, and all the Built bars, 100% real chocolate. Like I said, low calorie, high protein. You can replace your candy bars with these. They are better. And a typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. But if you go to built.com, and you scroll down to the macros chart, you'll be blown away. High protein, low cal, high fiber, low carbs. Most Built bars, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Now, if you compare that to a candy bar, that's 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. But check it out for yourself. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off of your next order. All right, let's talk about his teammate at IMG, Keontae George. Keontae's from the Dallas area.
Yes, sir.
I've been following him since he was a freshman. I've kind of been following him from afar because the first time I heard of him, I think I was living overseas. I think he won like a state championship as a freshman. And then maybe, was it 2 summers ago, I went to an AAU game. You know, I'm just trying to see what the hype is about. And he showed out. And ever since then, I've been following him. I was going to his high school games last year, saw him play pickup a couple times. I know he didn't have like the most productive game on paper, but what did you think of him from watching him at the practices?
Well, the practices were a mixed bag with Keontae. And, you know, I thought in the first practice, he had a couple nice drives and looked pretty decent. I felt that Wednesday's practice, he struggled a little bit. Like he was playing next to Nick Smith, and they were playing a roster with Amari Bailey and Derek, and I just felt like it wasn't necessarily the best fit. Oh, Anthony Black as well, who I'd love to get into.
Another kid from the Dallas
he was
area.
a late yeah he was a late addition, but he's a real deal prospect. But yeah, as far as Keontae, here's where Keontae really stood out. So on Thursday they have a scrimmage against a team they refer to now as the Portland Generals, where they get a bunch of local guys and they fly a few guys in to scrimmage against the world team in private and then the USA team in front of NBA scouts. And in the Thursday scrimmage, Keontae started off a little slow, finished with a bang. He made 5 3-pointers in the fourth quarter. And like, you know, kind of like back to back to back, like just showing that, you know, when he really gets rhythm and can get a hop into that jump shot, he can get like just a scoring spree going. So yeah, that's where, you know, Keontae can just have those little explosive moments. I think that's kind of the excitement behind him. But yeah, what do you feel about like Keontae as a prospect compared to the rest of this class? Like, have you like any thoughts, like just in terms of the other guards that were in the Nike Hoop Summit?
I mean, as far as seeing guys in person, I haven't seen a bunch of them in person. And sometimes it's kind of unfair to judge guys that you've seen in person against guys that you've only seen highlights on. But I have seen Nick Smith play. I saw they had a Wooten camp a couple, I think it was like last year, whatever. And maybe it was 2020. I don't know. They had a Wooten camp in Dallas. And I heard of him. I knew he was maybe like a top 25 recruit, but I felt like that was like a coming out party. And then he carried that momentum into last summer. And I've even seen like he's someone that people are considering a top 5 pick for next year's draft, which is already pretty much, you got 2 guys that are solidified as 1 and 2. And so looking forward to seeing him. And then of course seeing with Anthony Black. I mean, they're going to the same school. Now that's going to be really interesting. Speaking of interesting, I find it interesting that Keontae is from he's from the Dallas area. He's going to Baylor, while Anthony Black's dad, Terry, who I consider a friend, is a Baylor alum, and he's going to Arkansas. But yeah, I mean, I think Keontae can hold his own. I mean, just looking at just past rankings from past classes, you never know who is going to be that much better of a college player than where they were ranked. I mean, just last year, and I just did a podcast on it, just last year, Imani Bates was ranked higher than Paolo Banchero and Jabari Smith. So like you got to throw the rankings out. But I think
depending on who was ranking. Yeah.
Well, this was ESPN's ranking, not to bash ESPN, but I mean, And so, but yeah, I think Keontae can definitely hold his own. I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a big year at Baylor next year. And when I say big year, I mean, I don't expect any Baylor guard to put up like 20 points a game as a freshman. But I think that, he can showcase the shooting, and he's a really good athlete. But Nick, I wanted to ask you about Nick. What did you think about Nick?
I'm a fan of Nick Smith. I think that, his touch as a shooter and his touch on floaters stood out against the other guards. And also like he showed at least some on-ball acumen. Like when you look at the roster, it was kind of hard to see like, who was going to be the primary initiator. And Nick Smith kind of took the helm of that, at least is one of the better ones there. And then I felt like the other like good primary initiator was Anthony Black.
Yeah.
So both of those guys go into Arkansas. And then the thing I love about Anthony Black is not only is he 6'7" and has the ability to handle the ball, is probably the best passer on the team as well.
Yeah.
His defense was like in a game and in practices where defense is sometimes optional, even with the Hoop Summit being kind of more intense than a typical high school all-star game, Anthony Black just played like lockdown defense at times on ball. I thought he was really good off ball as well. And then he showed some ability off the ball as an offensive player. You'd maybe like to see a bit more of an ability to create him offense for himself. But I just felt like the tandem of Nick Smith, who's about 6'4", I think he has a 6'9" wingspan, Nick Smith, and great shooter, great touch, ability to put the ball on the floor as well. It can play passing lanes and, even get steals on ball with his length. So yeah, I thought that like tandem looks really lethal next year for Arkansas.
Yeah, then you add on Jordan Walsh, another kid that I know from the Dallas area, and they got
another great defender.
Yeah, they're Musselman is he's built something pretty phenomenal in such a short amount of time.
The 3 McDonald's burgers.
3 of them, yeah. But like there's this debate on social media because I live in Dallas, and Dallas had 5 guys on the that were McDonald's All-American. So now there's like this huge debate: is Dallas the new basketball mecca? And I kind of stay out of it, but I mean, like it gets pretty intense between people from LA and people from like New Jersey, whatever. But if Arkansas does well next season, then I can just imagine people from Dallas saying, "Oh, it's because they had 2 burger boys from the DFW area." Now, BetOnline is the #1 source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You can find the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. And that is because BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Once again, thank you for making Locked On NBA Draft, which is now NBA Big Board, your first listen of the day, and in this case, your first listen of the week. Now, for your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. They have nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It is free, and it is available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, the last player that I wanted to ask you about is someone that I've been high on for years. The first time I saw Jean Montero was in 2020. It was NBA All-Star Weekend at Basketball Without Borders. It was literally like one of the last basketball events in the world before everything changed. And I thought he was the best player at this event. I mean, he stood out. Josh Giddey was at the event, and I thought Montero was the better player at the time. And I remember talking to some agents, and they were just like, he's too small, like he's not like this freak athlete. So one agent actually did a video. He said, well, if you believe in him so much, create me a video on why you think that this kid is going to be an NBA player. I'm not 100% sure. So I dug up some film when he was at Gran Canaria, put it together, and I'm gonna call him, the agent, and be like, do you see where I'm coming from now? So what is your thoughts on Jan? Because he's not going to wow you with like crazy size, bouncy athleticism, but he just knows how to put the ball in the basket. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I felt like we were only allowed to go to 2 world practices, so I kind of had a limited viewing of him there. But you could see that the handling ability, the ability to see passing lanes, kind of get the offense running. And then in the game, he got off to a really quick start, and that ability to create pull-up jumpers for himself, relocate and get open, and knock down corner threes. I thought had a really strong performance in the actual game itself. I still do worry about the size though. Like that is one thing. Like I worry a bit about the size. I worry a bit about the defense.
But he has crazy hands
like
for steals. It's funny. Like if you look at his stats, he's always
for overtime.
Yeah, even when he played in Spain, he's always just collected multiple steals. He's always been like a really good rebounder, and he's always had like a decent amount of blocks, surprisingly. And but I think he just doesn't pass the eye test of kind of what you want out of a lead guard. You want that explosiveness. It kind of reminds me of maybe a little bit of Lou Williams in a sense, to where
I mean that's the hope for a small guard like that.
But even though he's not like crazy explosive, I haven't seen anyone that can stay in front of him. I mean, that the first step and the shiftiness and the offensive creativity, but he's been a pro for
a lot of craft
for years. Yeah. So I think he makes up with it. I mean, but you look at Trae Young, not saying he's Trae Young, but Trae isn't an ideal athlete by NBA standards, which is why he fell in the draft. I think in a redraft, obviously he goes a lot higher. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. Yes, definitely going to be, it was a strong draft. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it. You're the first guest that I've brought on since I've taken over for this Big Board feed. Where can the listeners find you and your work?
You can follow me on Twitter at NBA Draft Mikey V. You can follow Pro Insight at _Pro Insight, and then go to prospectiveinsight.com. We have fantastic Q&As, PI Pulse, which is our media stuff, and then we're available on YouTube and Instagram as well. And then I'm going to have an article on my thoughts on the Hoop Summit. Last time it came out to a 45-minute read. So I'm going to make a really detailed report on the Hoop Summit on the Stepien.
Okay, cool.
And so you can find it on there.
I think I'm gonna head home to the States, and that's gonna be like a 13-hour flight. So if it's 45-minute read, then I'll definitely have time for it. Well, thank you so much.
Glad to at least help your flight go by. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Luckily, the flights have been so empty lately. I mean, it's off topic. I've had like 7 consecutive flights where I've had a row to myself. So that makes it really, really easy. Go. And then the flights, I mean, it's cheaper to fly from Dallas to Europe than it is domestically from Dallas to almost anywhere in the country. So Luckily, the flights have been pretty good. Well, thank you, man, for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. Now, if you stay tuned, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of my first mock draft 1.0 that drops on NBABigBoard.com. Stay tuned. All right, and now with the conclusion of the regular season, we now know the standings based off of order, and just going to give you a glimpse of my mock draft, my first mock draft, solo mock draft under NBA Big Board since I've taken over. And since we know the order, I'm not going to give you all of it because I want you to check it out on NBA Big Board, but we know the Houston Rockets have the #1 pick. And with the #1 pick, the Rockets have, they have a variety of ways that they can go. They can go with Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga. They can go with Jabari Smith from Auburn. They can go with Paolo Banchero from Duke. And maybe if they just want to be a little bit different, they can go with Jaden Ivey from Purdue. Now, if you've been following me on the Locked On NBA Draft podcast or even just on social media, you know I am driving this Paolo Banchero bandwagon. And I think the Rockets should select Banchero simply because I think that they've already have their franchise guy in Jalen Green. Jalen Green got off to a slow start. I think he was ranked as the worst player in the NBA. And he finished strong, finished with 41 last night. He looks like the star that they was hoping for him to be. Again, just got off to a slow start, but finished strong. It is not a sprint. It is a marathon. And I think that Banchero would be a good second option next to Jalen Green, simply because you already know he's going to give you the rebounding. You know he can score on the block. You know he can create his own shot, but it is the playmaking that I am really sold on. I know it'll be a very, very interesting fit next to Alperen Sengun, because I imagine that is their center of the future. Be interesting fit on the defensive end, but I think it would give the Rockets 2 guys that can score on the block and 2 guys that I think are pretty good passers. And I think their interior 4-5 passing would be pretty cool. Also, I'm just a fan of how I believe Banchero will look with NBA spacing and with a more creative coach, I should say. So this was a no-brainer for anyone that has been listening. Paolo Banchero is my guy. But with the Orlando Magic, what should the Orlando Magic do with the second pick? You can go with Holmgren, who is, I guess he fits along the lines of what the Magic front office like. They like long, athletic defenders. Or do you go with Jabari Smith? So here's my thing with Orlando. I think that they need a defined pecking order. They have too many mouths to feed on that roster. I feel like if you ask 5 guys on the team, who is the best player? Who is the franchise guy? I think you might get 5 different names. I think Fultz may think he's the guy. I think Cole Anthony believes he's the guy. Franz Wagner has played well enough to where he can make a case and say he is that guy. Wendell Carter may feel like if he had enough touches in the post or was featured a little bit more, he could be the franchise guy. And then let's not forget about Jonathan Isaac, who has not played since the bubble, which seems like, I know it's only been 2 years, but it seems like Jonathan Isaac hasn't played in 4 years. He just got paid. And I saw that he had some type of setback. I don't know what Orlando should do, because I think no matter what, whoever the rookie is, he's going to go into a situation where there's a bunch of guys with overlapping skill sets, and he's going to go into a situation where somebody may not feel like he's better than the guy that is in front of him. So I think it's a really weird situation. I think they need to make some trades and kind of consolidate the roster. Don't know the best situation there. So Orlando has some decisions to make. Again, they can go Jabari Smith. He would definitely help them as far as with outside shooting. So with Chet, Orlando ranked near the bottom of the league in 3-point percentage, and both guys shot over 40% from 3. So I believe that they can help there. But my biggest issue for Orlando is, who's your go-to guy? Who is your franchise guy? Now, if you think Jabari or Chet is a franchise guy, then then I mean they may be fine there. But I don't know. They're in a weird situation. And then you got Detroit. Detroit will be able to choose between Banchero, Holmgren, or Jabari Smith. They have the easiest choice in a sense because they know that one of those guys is going to be available for them. But if you're Detroit, do you look to add Jaden Ivey? Again, Troy Weaver is the guy that's in charge there, and he was responsible for selecting Russell Westbrook. Not the most popular guy right now, but he was this freakishly explosive guard that was not considered a point guard out of UCLA, and then he's going to end up having a Hall of Fame career. And Jaden Ivey is a guy that's freakishly explosive, and you don't know if he's a point or a 1 or 2, but I think that he can fit in well with Cade Cunningham. He gives the Pistons some athleticism, but also if you decide to go, let's say Banchero, then you have, your 1-2 guys in Banchero and Cade Cunningham that can just create mismatches all over the floor. Both can post, both can pass, both can create their own shots. I would actually love that scenario. It would kind of suck for Marvin Bagley to be replaced by a fellow Dookie. But I mean, Detroit has some options. They are probably in the best position because they could end up getting the guy that they would have selected at number 1 and number 3. And then it just seems like the Thunder, no matter how bad they tank. I mean, did you see their rosters? Some of the worst rosters I've ever seen. I mean, they were playing like 6 guys. I don't even know if that team would have won the G League championship. And I just don't understand why they're not getting criticized like Sam Hinkie did with the process. But the Thunder, based off the standings, as bad as they tried to tank, still did not finish with a top 3 record. And I know it would just be awful if they don't win the number 1 pick or end up not picking in the top 3. They will have to, they have a tough choice. Let's say Banchero, Holmgren, and Smith are not available, which most people assume that they won't be available. Let's say they're not available. Does that mean that you select Jaden Ivey, which means you have a little bit of redundancy there with Gilgeous-Alexander, who's best with the ball in his hands. Giddey is best with the ball in his hands. And then, I guess you can say it's not too bad of a fit. And if you're the Thunder, you don't necessarily draft off fit anyway. You're just drafting off talent. But they may have to either try to trade down or at least try to get a center, because I think a center makes the most sense for the Thunder there, which, you can look at Jalen Duren, you can look at Mark Williams, you can look at Koloko. I just don't know if drafting another guard makes a lot of sense there. So they'll have some decisions to make. The Indiana Pacers, who are projected to pick 5 based off the standings, they have some decisions to make there. I'm sure they would love for Ivy to fall to them at number 5. He wouldn't have to move too far. But the guys in their range are Keegan Murray, Benedict Mathurin. They can choose Shaedon Sharpe if he decides to enter the draft, which has not happened yet. Then you got like AJ Griffin is somebody that's in their range. And then if you go from there between 5, 6, 7, 8, I think depending on the team, you're going to see Sharpe, Griffin, Keegan Murray, maybe throw Jalen Duren in that mix, maybe even Johnny Davis in that mix. I think all of those guys are just going to be in that same range. So this is going to be an interesting draft. But if you want to hear my mock draft, or you want to hear more of my takes or read about them, go to NBA Big Board, check it out. Sign up for a subscription. I have some free content also available, but check it out. Stay tuned for tomorrow. Have my guy Richard Stayman coming on, and we are going to debate about a couple players that are on his big board compared to mine. And we're just going to have an interesting debate over why we feel like this player is better than this player and vice versa. All right. Thank you so much again for making this debut episode, at least for me as the host of NBA Big Board. Thank you so much for checking it out. Now, check out the Locked On NBA podcast, from the first jump ball of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the finals. The Locked On experts will take you deep inside into playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. Once again, this is Rafael Barlowe. I keep wanting to say Locked On NBA Draft, but this is Rafael Barlowe, NBA Big Board, signing out, and I am out.